Warning, this content is for entertainment and educational purposes only. This video is brought to you by First Detachment Nutrition. Battle tested, expert formulated. Use discount code AB10 at checkout for 10% off. All right, folks, Big Paul here today with another Anabolic Q&A. We got some good ones lined up today. I haven't done one of these in a while. Sorry, folks, I've been slacking on the Anabolic Q&As. And before we get into it, I just want to remind you guys to like and subscribe to the channel. I get a ton of people watching, but not that many people subscribing. I'd appreciate it if you just take the time to subscribe. It means a lot to me. It helps me out in the algorithm. And let's dig into all the questions in just 1 second. All right, before we get started on the questions, just a quick reminder that I have a flash sale going on for the Science of Anabolics and PEDZ course. It's 20% off right now. Discount code is IFBB in celebration for my pro card. So just put in the discount code IFBB and you'll get 20% off. Link is in the video description below. All right, first question is from Stephen Gordon. He asked, what is the minimum effective dose of HGH for bodybuilding? Here's what I've seen with HGH dosing. It is all over the place. And no one yet has been able to explain to me where bodybuilders came up with the dosing. I hear some people say 2 units. I hear some people say 10 units. I hear some people say 5 units. Some people say, oh my God, 10 units, you're going to grow a big nose. Your belly's going to be sticking out. You're going to turn into Andre the Giant. And there's literally no science or any real rational information to back any of those claims up. Nobody knows where any of the bodybuilding dosing even came from. I think a lot of it was just driven by dudes being on constrained budgets. So they came up with these low doses. You'll hear a lot of guys say 2 to 5 units. Don't think 2 to 5 units does much of anything at all. At least in my experience. You might get some numb hands. It might help a little bit with sleep, recovery, body composition. You might get a little bit of a benefit from it, but to really get into the true bodybuilding doses where you see a difference, I have not seen it do a whole lot until you get up around 10 units. That's just my experience. If you look at therapeutic dosing for HIV patients, for example, Serostim, the therapeutic dose of Serostim is 18 units per day. Now, I'm not saying go out and take 18 units per day, but you have to ask yourself, when you consider that, where in the hell did bodybuilders come up with their dosing for HGH? I don't know. Nobody seems to know, and I think it all just was made up over the years. A lot of it was constrained by budget because HGH used to be prohibitively expensive. Now it's a lot cheaper with generic HGH. But my advice with any of this stuff is start off low, see how you respond, titrate up as necessary. So me personally, when I started off with something like 2 units, and then I went to 4, and then my hands got numb, so to back down a little bit, and then I did 6. I've gone up as high as 18 units. I couldn't handle 18 units. It made me so tired I couldn't work. And I've settled in somewhere around 9 to 10 units recently. I did run 15 briefly. I've tried just about every dose, but I would say really I didn't see a major difference with it until I pushed up into the 9 to 10 unit range and north of that. Patrick Albani asked, if you have been on steroids for years, is there any compelling reason to ever cycle off and take a break from them, or should you just cruise? Now, this is a controversial take, and this is my thought process on it. When guys come off, you hear dudes cycling off for like 3 months, 4 months, whatever the case may be. A lot of these drugs are not out of your system for 6, 8 weeks. And then you're off for 2 months. You have a hormonal crash, an estrogen rebound. A lot of times guys are going to be taking harsh PCT drugs to try to compensate for some of this stuff. That makes it even worse. And then 4 to 8 weeks later, they go right back on the same stuff that they came off of, and you've created this massive hormonal yo-yo Your body is all over the place. Your body's constantly striving for homeostasis. And you create an environment for rapid fat gain and a situation where you probably have done more damage to your health than if you just stayed on some TRT. The whole cycling off or doing PCT for 6, 8, 12, whatever weeks, to me is just idiotic. You don't cycle off blood pressure medicine. You don't cycle off birth control, which is a steroidal hormone. You don't cycle off cholesterol medicine. No other drug do you cycle on and off of. You don't cycle on and off your own natural testosterone. You don't cycle on and off your own natural HGH. You want steady levels. I don't know what the purpose of doing a 16-week cycle, coming off losing half your gains and getting fat for 8 to 12 weeks is. It just seems idiotic to me and counterproductive. My thought process is if you're not going to be off for 6 months or more, there's no reason to do a PCT and there's no reason to come off completely. All right, next question is, what do you think of doing OMAD dieting with 300 grams of protein in a single meal? OMAD is 1 meal a day with a gram of test and a gram of EQ. Is that productive for muscle gain? The only reason I can think of doing 1 meal per day, I have done some intermittent fasting to help with digestion where I will just eat 1 meal a day. It's not 300 grams of protein, that's for sure. Is to give my digestive tract, my GI, a break and to let it recover and heal. I don't think eating 1 large meal a day is going to be the most productive thing for muscle growth. If you're trying to get huge, that's not the way to do it. The format and the formula of how to get big is already laid out for us. I don't know why everybody's constantly trying to reinvent the wheel. If you look at what pro bodybuilders do, they have tried everything over the years. It's a simple formula. You eat meat and rice 4 to 6 times a day, probably more like 6 times a day. Frequent meals to keep a steady pool of amino acids available for your body for hypertrophy. You don't know when you're going to grow. You might eat that 300 grams of protein and have no amino acids available 12 hours later when your body decides to grow. You're just going to end up pooping all of it out. You're end up going to converting that to carbohydrates through gluconeogenesis. That 1 meal is not going to be sufficient enough to last you through to the next day and to cause sufficient hypertrophy. Nobody's getting huge that way. And if you're going to rock that much gear with it, it's pointless taking all that gear. Now, if you want to do the 1 meal a day thing, go right for it. If it's something you're doing for health or something you're trying to do to experiment, I'm all for that. But to me, it makes it 0 sense to do that for trying to get huge. Just split that up into 3, 4 smaller meals spread out through the day. You're probably going to get a lot more out of that because of keeping a steady stream of amino acids in your body, thus stimulating growth or providing the tools available for growth at the time when it's necessary. And you're just wasting that gear. There's no point in taking all that gear if you're going to do the 1 meal a day high protein diet. To me, that's nonsensical. All right, next one is from Lake for Giants. He asked, my estradiol came back at 35. Libido is not as it should be. I think I am a little high or a little low. I'm not really sure. Total test is around 1400. 35 is right smack dab in the reference range, probably where it needs to be. Now, what I have seen, this is just anecdotal experience. I don't really have any science to back this up, but I've worked with guys over the years. I've looked at hundreds of blood panels. Everybody has a unique range where they feel optimized. Now, you don't want to let your estrogen run wild. You don't want it to be crushed. But when it comes to sex drive, what I have seen, this is just anecdote, what I have observed over the years. When you have low sex drive, but your erections work, it's usually your estradiol's too low. When you have high sex drive and you can't get an erection, usually it's high estradiol. You probably want to play around with it and get it somewhere in range. You said his testosterone is 1400, so that's not the problem. Or it could be psychological. There could be something else going on. You could have some sort of health issue. Sometimes sex drive will go to shit if your blood pressure is high. Sometimes sex drive will go to shit if your Blood sugar is high. Sometimes sex drive will go to shit if you're not sleeping. There are a bunch of other factors that could affect your libido. Those numbers seem normal. So I would suspect that there's something else going on. It's either psychological. There could be stress at work. There could be a multitude of things that are going on, something with your health. It's probably more than likely psychological. I also see a lot of guys that are constantly chasing the high libido that you had when you are 18 to 25 years old, and then they get a little older and they're trying to replicate that high libido again, and you just don't get it back. It doesn't matter how much you take. Like, I am 50 years old, and if I'm running 3 grams of gear, I don't have the libido that I had when I was 18 to 25 years old. I just don't. It doesn't matter if everything is optimized or not. I am not an 18-year-old boy anymore. You're not going to have that same sort of libido, that same sort of sex drive that you did when you were younger. That's just not going to happen. All right, CHGOH asks, now that you have stopped trying to beat the logbook, do you still log your workouts? Or enter them in a gym base, I'm not sure what he's saying. Or enter the gym based on instinctive exercise. I think he's talking about, am I just going by instinct and how I feel when I get in the gym? The answer is, I sometimes log my workouts. Like when I'm in the off season and I'm trying to progress, I do log workouts. I think there is some benefit to logging workouts to just hold yourself accountable. I used to be meticulous about logging my workouts, and here over the last couple of years, I've kind of stopped doing it. My weights aren't really progressing anymore. I pretty much keep my volume in the same range. I just am very mindful when I train. I do think when you're younger and you're in early parts of bodybuilding, when you're in the beginner to intermediate phase of bodybuilding, I'm in the advanced phase of bodybuilding now, it does make sense to log your workouts and have some sort of reference point that you can see where you're at. Now, one danger of logging workouts that I personally have experienced is that sometimes you can get too obsessed on beating that logbook where you start to compromise form, you start to cheat, you start to do things that are wacky to get ahead of the logbook. You get in a competition with the logbook, and then sometimes you lose sight of what the purpose of the workout is. Now I try to be more mindful with my workouts and make sure that I am being very meticulous with my form and getting a solid muscle contraction, making sure that I'm actually feeling it in the muscle that I kind of work. And I found that being more mindful with my workouts has actually helped me produce better results than simply just trying to pound and beat the logbook all the time. Now, I do think for young guys, I will say this, beginner and intermediate bodybuilders, it probably makes sense to log your workouts. All right, here's another question from a random user. What can I use instead of Winstrol? Winstrol makes my joints hurt at the end of contest prep. Is there an alternative to Winstrol that won't make me feel so crappy? Yes. And this is what I have done on previous contest preps. This is why I was leery about using Winstrol. Winstrol always makes my joints and connective tissue feel awful. It makes me weak, but it gives me a hard, chiseled look on stage. What I've done in the past, what I've done with some of my clients, is have them run higher dose Anavar with some halo tests in the last couple of weeks of contest prep. I found that does not nuke your joints and keeps your workouts nice and strong, and you have better workouts going into the show. Now, it's a trade-off. I will say you will not achieve quite the same look that you do with running Winstrol into your peak week and into your show. I do think Winstrol gives you the best look on stage. If you're chasing workouts, I would say probably opt with the Anavar and halo testing combo. If you're trying to chase good look on the stage, if you want to be dry and hard, which I believe I was this year, Winstrol is probably going to be the better option. And what I did this year that was different, I ran high doses for the last 10 days. I ran Winstrol for basically the last 2 weeks of my prep. That was it. Nothing crazy, just enough to give me the look I wanted on stage. And I only had really a couple weeks of joints feeling like shit, and I pulled my workouts back anyway, so it wasn't that big of a deal. All right, next one is from Manuel. He asks, what do you think of doing an EQ only cycle for somebody who gets acne on even low dose of testosterone? Is that a viable option? I don't think EQ only would be a great option. You're not going to have proper DHT and estrogen conversion. I believe, if I recall correctly, that EQ converts at a lower rate to both, on both ends. And not only that, it converts to primarily estrone as a estrogen and DHB as the DHT portion of it. So you're not getting any DHT or really estradiol conversion that you would from testosterone, which your body does need some of. I would assume that if you ran EQ only, that you're probably going to crash your estradiol. You're probably going to feel like crap. I think your libido might be shit on that. I don't know. I've never run an EQ only cycle. I'm just speculating. I've never had anybody run an EQ only cycle. To me, it seems like a bad choice. And a lot of times when I see acne from guys on testosterone, it's not actually the testosterone that's causing the acne. It's the estradiol has gotten too high. When estrogen gets high, there's an increase in sebum production. And it's actually the estradiol conversion that's causing the issue. So a lot of times if you just control your estradiol conversion with an aromatase inhibitor, you can prevent the acne. That's not to say that it's always the case, but on a low dose testosterone, there shouldn't be enough DHT conversion to actually cause acne through that route. It's usually estradiol getting too high. All right, next one is from Ryan Cassidy. He asked, why does tren kill acid production in the stomach? From what I understand, it's the exact opposite. Tren does not kill acid production in the stomach. It actually increases acid production in the stomach through prostaglandin response and stimulation of the vagal nerve, which downstream stimulates the proton pump, and then you have more acid. People end up taking proton pump inhibitors, something like omeprazole, which will reduce acid production from the proton pump, thus relieving the acid reflux. So it's not actually a low acid problem. It's a high acid problem. Orals also can exacerbate that and make it worse. So a lot of guys, there's all this bro myth that every bit of acid reflux is caused by low stomach acid, which can be the case, but generally in bodybuilders, that's not what's going on. It's too much acid, and dudes will do stupid stuff like taking apple cider vinegar and say that cures it, when most of the time it doesn't do shit. That's not to say they can't help in some situations. A lot of times you just need a proton pump inhibitor and that'll make it go away, or an antacid. If you're eating Tums, it's not low acid. Tums wouldn't be neutralizing or making things better if it was a low acid issue. You've got too much acid production going on. So that's not the problem. A lot of times it's actually high acid. It's not low acid. All right, last question we got here is from Lucas Bodybuilding. He asks, what are some contest prep strategies for people that are low estrogen converters with the goal of keeping joints healthy and not crushing? Well, you guys are blessed. It's a lot easier to get guys prepped that are low E2 converters. I have a lot easier time of getting those guys lean. They don't have the same issues that other dudes do. Really, the simple answer is you can just run tests higher. It's just that simple. And you might not need an AI. It's that simple. Just run more tests, less of your DHT derivatives. You probably don't need an AI. Just scale it that way. So when I'm working with somebody who is a low estrogen converter or a high estrogen converter, it's the ratio of DHT derivative to the testosterone that gets adjusted based on how they're responding. More estrogen production, lower test, higher DHT derivative ratio. Test, lower DHT derivative ratio, and less aromatase inhibitor use. It's really that simple. You slide the scale one way or another based on how people respond. Now, going into the show the last couple of weeks, if you want to get really dry and hard, I know there's people out there that say that you shouldn't crush estrogen going into the show, but that's absolutely wrong. Bodybuilders have not found that to be successful for the last 30 years. There's a reason why guys do things the way they do going into a show. The guys that show up on stage hard, chiseled, and dry at the end of the show, they are crushing their estrogen at the end. You don't have to have it buried for months. In fact, that's probably unwise and unhealthy. But the last couple weeks going into the show, you do need to nuke your estrogen. People are worried about the cardiovascular effects and effects on lipids bearing your estrogen going into a show. It's only a couple weeks. You're doing a shit ton of cardio. Your fats are probably very low. The chances of having any sort of plaque buildup during that period of time are pretty close to zero from the diet and the cardio. And quickly after the show, your estrogen's going to rebound back anyway, and you're going to be back into normal ranges and everything's going to balance back out. Now, this is not medical advice, but that's just what I've seen. So consider that when you're doing your contest prep. It's a smart coach will know how to adjust that and get you dialed in for what is the best look on the stage for you. All right, folks, that's all I got for you on this one. Just a reminder again, 20% off the Science of PEDs and Anabolics e-course for the next week. It ends next Thursday is when it ends. So grab it while you can. Discount code is IFBB. It's in this video description below. Link is there. I appreciate all the support. It's been overwhelming this past week since I got my pro card. Everybody's been very gracious and kind. I appreciate each and every one of you. I love all of you. Even the guys that are haters, I love you too. Thank you, bros, for all your support. It really means a lot to me. Take care. For coaching or consultations, head over to www.anabolicbodybuilding.com to book your spot today. I can help you with optimizing hormones, fat loss, muscle gain, physique, athletic performance, nutrition, and health. For more information, shoot me an email at bigp3rd@gmail.com.